Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home.
Throughout history, music has sustained people through war, exile, and catastrophe. In the American Civil War, slaves and soldiers alike sang spirituals like Swing Low, Sweet Chariot to find courage amid oppression. During the Second World War, resistance fighters encoded hope into anthems which were smuggled across enemy lines. In times of collapse, music often speaks louder than declarations. But what is it at all about this song? Let me give you some interesting Swing Low timelines. Historically, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot was composed by one Wallace Willis and Minerva Willis, as well as Choctaw Freedman in the Old Indian Territory in what is now known as Choctaw County, near the county seat of Hugo in Oklahoma. Around 1865, it is believed he may have been inspired by the sight of the Red River by which he was toiling. Of course, he was a slave, which reminded him of the Jordan River and of the prophet Elijah being taken to heaven by a chariot. And some sources actually claim that Willis had those lyrics and actually referred to the Underground Railroad, a freedom movement that helped black people escape from the southern slavery to the north and to Canada. Guess what discovery we have this time? Stay tuned. In the Psalms, in our discourse in this particular episode, we will be discovering, like we always do, very important themes as we still look at allusions, symbols, and interpretations within prophecy. Remember, you are welcome to Steady Insights. In this episode, we will look at very important themes within the book of Psalms. Psalm 46, concerning the hope in distress. Psalm 47, the final victory. Psalm 75, the end of sin. And Psalm 67, our task for today. What is really for us to be done? Let's commence. The hope in distress. One of the most distressing passages you may find is Psalm 46, verse 6. It is written, "The nations raged, the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, the earth melted." And you wonder, in which particular setting are these words being spoken? Well, before we delve deeper, it is noteworthy to go back to the first verse, where we are actually given assurances. 46 verse 1 says, "God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble." Once again, I would like to remind you that we have been going through allusions to improve our understanding in prophecy. And here in this particular juncture, the question is, what does Revelation 6 verse 14 and 2 Peter 3 verse 12 relate to? Do they even affect us? It is important for me to start by talking about some tenets found within Revelation 6. Remember, we are still looking at prophecy, especially in the context of the book of Revelation. We see clearly, per the tenets of Revelation 6, that seals are being opened. And when you take time to go through those verses, clearly seals numbering 7, which are recorded in the prophecies have begun to be revealed, and 6 of them are actually opened in Revelation 6. And so frantically, verse 14 discloses the opening of the 7th seal. Within the 7th seal, we see happenings of terror, things which would have brought fear and crippling to people of this age at the moment. But as we go through, it appears that clearly there is something that is happening which does not only bring distress, but is also engraved in hope. What is happening to the earth as we see here? The earth is removed. The mountains are moved out of their places, and the waters roar. The nations also roar. But we are not left in suspense. We also see what God does. And what does God do? He protects and strengthens us. He helps us in tribulation and gives us joy. Within the context of this narrative, the earth actually melts, and that action is initiated by God. The important thing is, it is our refuge. The reason is, when God melts the earth, it is actually an initial action to convey the idea that His people are not going to remain there. So it is, of course, our refuge. And when I say our refuge, I mean those who find their names written in the book of life. He goes on to put an end to wars. He is exalted and exalted amongst the nations. What then do I do? Do not fear. We are told to see the works of God, to be still and know God, and to take refuge in Him. Very important themes as we see in Revelation 6. But all these are meant to clear doubts around what many people see as fear whenever they read the book of Revelation. In Revelation 6, we are presented with a timeline of the events that are soon to happen, which of course some have begun on the earth. And in the dying embers of the earth's history, just before the second advent, that is where we see glimpses of those predictions already depicted in the book of Psalm 46. As clearly seen, an overview tells us that Psalm 46 verse 6, for example, is a prophetic contest. Nations roar, which actually sets the foundation for the global alliance which will be formed in Revelation 13. And this will actually pressure God's people. Again, we see that the kingdoms fall, which predicts what will happen in Revelation 17 verse 16. The final plagues dismantling the powers of the earth. Not only that, as we see in Psalm 46, where God lifts up His voice, in the same vein, Christ descends with a shout in 1 Thessalonians. Then finally, the earth melts in Psalms, whereas in Jeremiah, in the prophetic way, there is a cosmic destruction that begins. You're confused? Well, let me amplify this with illustrations. Clearly, according to the Psalms, nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall, and God lifts His voice and the earth melts. So first of all, we see nations are in uproar because of the ongoing natural and political disorders. Even as we see now, governments unite under common bodies. And clearly we see this depicted in the image of the beast. And they seek desperate solutions. Unfortunately, this will negatively affect God's people, who will be persecuted as the cause of these disorders. Then what happens? The kingdoms fall. The last plagues, as we see in Revelation 17, will ravage and shake the nations, which will turn against one another. Then as we progress, God lifts His voice. Jesus with a shout and with a trumpet of God will come and end the history of the nations according to 1 Thessalonians 4:16. And finally, the earth melts, as Jeremiah indicates. The land will be left desolate and empty. And I believe you do know that by that time, the people of God would have been in heaven. That is the stage which is set by Psalm 46. But it does not only present to us distress, but the hope which we shall have as a people. The final victory. Clap your hands, all you peoples, shout to God with a voice of triumph. Do you know that historically, whenever a particular nation set foot on a new land, they claimed ownership? And this is actually not something we see in our world now only. It has roots in the Old Testament. For example, in Deuteronomy 11 verse 24, the mere disposition of your foot on ground usually connoted ownership. Let's go through some timeline in history. According to modern space exploration, for example, in 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin set foot on the moon, and this marked a historic moment in space exploration. Well, we can say that the US didn't claim ownership. Of course, they didn't create the moon, but that act symbolized a significant achievement and some form of pride and ownership in their own sense. Again, as space agencies and private companies explore Mars, the Outer Space Treaty in 1967 now prohibits countries from claiming ownership of celestial bodies. Well, that's good news. In ancient and colonial era, Leif Erikson, a Viking explorer, is credited with being the first European to set foot in North America around 1000 AD. And this discovery has led to further explorations and eventual claim of ownership. It's so funny how humans claim ownership over something created by God. Finally, Christopher Columbus had several voyages to the Americas, and that marked the beginning of European exploration and colonization. And to be frank with you, the idea of discovery during his voyage was often used to justify claims of ownership. And that is why we see, for example, the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 divided the New World between Portugal and Spain, where the Portuguese claimed the eastern lands of the meridian and the Spanish claimed the western lands of the meridian. So I go through all this and I'm like, wow, it is no surprise then that Satan echoed the importance of roaming to and fro on the earth, because he was roaming as though the earth were his. Wow, Satan knew what he was doing. But do you know what happens at the second coming of Christ? The fascinating thing is, he does not touch the earth. According to 1 Thessalonians 4:16 through 17, Christ comes, but his feet does not touch the earth in the second advent. But rather, after the millennium, he places his foot on the Mount of Olives. Well, of course, that was also prophesied according to Zechariah 14 verse 4. And here the New Jerusalem descends and God reclaims what was usurped, what was taken. Clearly, Psalm 47 is a prophetic shout anticipating the enthronement of Christ as king over the restored earth. It doesn't end there. Psalm 75 comes into the scene, portraying the end of sin. For in the hand of the Lord there is a cup. The wicked of the earth shall drain it and drink down its dregs. We see this in the 8th verse of Psalm 75. What is happening here? There are some divine judgment parallels. Now let me take you through them. In Psalm 75 verse 8, we see a cup of wrath. And that actually points to Revelations 14 verse 9 to 10. where the angel's message is proclaimed to show the wrath of God, and that those who disobey him will drink of his cup of wrath. Again, in Psalm 75 verse 2, we see a direct link, a parallel with Revelation 20 verse 11, where there is an appointed time of judgment. It continues where we see the pride being the root of rebellion, the pride of nations and leaders in Psalm 75, as well as the pride of individuals rejecting God. So perfectly, while Psalm 46 discusses the hope in distress during the seed seal in Revelation 6, Psalm 75 finds a perfect way to also disclose what will happen to those who refuse to go according to the words of the Lord. So the day will come when the property that Satan usurped will be restored to God. But until then, and even after then, clearly, after the final judgment, the wicked will be destroyed in the lake of fire, which is the second death. Here is the crucial point. The crucial point that determines the destiny of individuals and nations is pride. The pride of leaders seeking to maintain and increase their power, and the pride of individuals which leads them to stubbornly reject God and exalt themselves. But that presents to us another very important task. While Psalm 75 echoes the final judgment when sin and pride are crushed and the humble are glorified, we see that Psalm 66 and of course Psalm 67 presents to us the task for us as a people. In Numbers 6 verse 25, we see a priestly blessing. And that priestly blessing is actually echoed in the presence of the Lord, when the priests would always occasionally bless the people before they go asunder. In Psalm 67 verse 1 and 2, we see something similar. May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face shine upon us. Christ makes it possible for God's light to shine on us. And you ask yourself, what is the purpose of this? The purpose of this blessing is not merely to comfort, but to witness. For example, if you're a lover of physics, then you might have as well known the propagation of light and reflection. Do you know the smoother the surface of a mirror, the more it reflects the rays of light? The smoother your life, in consonance with the life of Christ, the better you reflect his unending grace and his character. So by being illuminated, Christ shows us the character of God. Then by accepting that character, we merely not only get comfort, but also witness to others, so that the world may know and worship him who is righteous. Wow, Psalm 67 is a psalm of mission, and it reminds us that until the final restoration, our call is to reflect his light to the nations.